Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Councillor Steve Pitt. I'm the leader of Portsmouth City Council. As Councillor Susie Horton, the Cabinet Member for Children, Families and Education, is away, the decision-making powers for the Children, Families and Education portfolio at this meeting have been delegated to myself. This delegation is to commence at the start of the meeting and cease at its close. Some basic housekeeping before we get started. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room. Public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at the turning circle at the end of King Henry Street past the University's Park building, because there's a rather large ice rink in the way of Queen Victoria's statue. To comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. There is live web streaming today. May I draw people's attention to the fact that this meeting will be webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast the meeting. Everyone speaking will be on camera. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those explicitly stating they do not wish to be recorded. Can everyone please participating in the meeting please use the microphones provided and remember to turn them off when they have finished. We'll start with some introductions. And we'll go to my left.
Karen Martin, Democratic Services.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, Mike Stoneman, Deputy Director for Education.
Welcome, Mike.
Good afternoon, Councillor Hannah Brent for Drayton and Farlington.
Welcome, Hannah. Any declarations of interests? No, none. And there are no deputations for the meeting, in which case we proceed straight to item 3, which is school funding arrangements for 2025-2026. Mike Stoneman to report.
Sorry, Councillor, you've missed apologies.
Oh, did I? Sorry, are there any? No. It's because I asked those beforehand. Sorry, there are no apologies for this meeting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pitt. So this report on school funding arrangements provides an update on the latest developments in respect of the arrangements for 25-26. Worth noting that this year has been quite challenging due to delays in publicly available information following the general election and then the budget that was announced at the end of October. The information would normally be released by the DFE in July. That's been delayed, and so far we have a policy document which was produced in early October, followed by a further update in early November, but unfortunately the information lacked detail. Therefore, the consultation with schools and this report has been undertaken with the limited information available and the assumption that all formula funding changes have been included in the policy document. Just picking out a few key points within the report. Section 5 explains the changes to the schools block. It now covers the DFE's rolling in the teachers' pay and pension grants for 24-25 and the core schools budget grant into the mainstream funding factors as set out in Table 2. And Appendix 1 shows the indicative 25-26 unit rates for each of the funding factors in the school funding formula without the area cost adjustment, which will be added to the formula once that is published by the DFE. Also, please note the proposed growth fund lump sum payments for 25-26, which are set out in paragraph 5.11. We did some consultation with schools, and the feedback we had from schools was to suggest a rounding process for published admission number increases that were not a full or half class, and we've responded to that, and those changes are set out in paragraph 5.13. Table 3 sets out the notional SEND budget factors and percentages. Should be noted that the notional SEND is not additional money but an indicative amount to guide schools' spending decisions. There are no proposed changes to the factors for 25-26. At the time of writing this report, the minimum funding guarantee for 25-26 formula had not been published. In line with previous years, we are proposing to implement the MFG published by the DFE subject to affordability. And paragraphs 5.21 to 5.24 set out our proposals to manage affordability, which includes, in the unlikely event of a surplus funding that is transferred to the high needs block, and we can transfer up to a maximum of 5%. Section 7 deals with the proposed per pupil dedelegation rates for primary and secondary maintained schools, which will be finalised in January. Schools Forum following receipt of the October 24 census information in mid-December. The report provides a very brief update on the high needs block, the central school services block and the early years block. The key change to note in this area is the increase in the early years pass-through rate to providers, so that is increasing from 95% to 96% for 25-26. Consultation has been circulated to early years providers regarding the proposed changes to the funding formula, the results of which will be brought back to Schools Forum and Cabinet member early in 2025. Finally, the DfE have confirmed that they will be providing a separate grant to support schools with the increase in national insurance rates from April 2025. Further information is expected to be published in the spring. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mike. As you say, not ideal having to do things theoretically to some extent, but we've got deadlines to hit, and it's important that they are met. No questions from me. Hannah, anything? Okay, in which case there are some decisions that we need to note. Note the Department of Education's proposed changes to school revenue funding arrangements 25-26 are set out in the report, so noted. B, approve the proposals for implementing the local funding formula arrangements as set out in this report too. 1, implement the national funding formula rates of both primary and secondary schools in 2025-26 as set out in Appendix 1. Secondly, to implement a minimum funding guarantee at the top of the range published by the DfE, subject to affordability for 2025-2026 as set out in paragraph 5.19. And thirdly, the methods of managing affordability as set out in paragraphs 5.21 to 5.24 of the report, so approved. C, endorse the growth fund values set out in paragraph 5.11 and the criteria as set out in Appendix 2 and the proposed revision of paragraph 5.13 of the report, so endorsed. And D, note the delegation of funding to support the education functions as set out in section 7 of the report, so noted. So that takes us to item 4 on the agenda, the Dedicated Schools Grant 2024-25 Quarter 2 Budget Monitoring Report. Back to you, Mike.
Thank you. So this report details the forecasted position of the DSG as at the end of September 24. There are a couple of things that should be noted. Firstly, as at the end of September, the class lists that we have and the information regarding autumn term placements for high needs were not all received, and therefore the associated high needs budgets have been forecast on budget. There is a potential that the forecasts will change over the course of the autumn term as those class lists are confirmed. The early years block allocation was decreased in July 2024, and that takes into account the January 24 census. The other key thing to note is at the moment we are projecting an overspend of £317,000. The key factors in this are to do with post-16, so we've been reviewing the funding rates for the City of Portsmouth College in terms of high needs. There have been no changes over the last 10 years, and we're now doing a thorough review with the college for that, which we hope will conclude shortly. We haven't agreed on our interim arrangements, and that takes into account an overspend there of £475,000. And then we also have an overspend in relation to the Element 3 top-up rates for our special schools, notably the Harbour School and the Mary Rose Academy, where we have agreed changes to the EHCPs following some annual reviews, which have led to an increase in the Element 3 top-up rate, and that's led to £161,500 overspend. Those are the two key reasons for that overspend. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, no questions from me, Mike. Hannah, anything?
There were no questions as such, but it was just, actually I'd like to just place on record, because I work for the City of Portsmouth College, it would be a declaration of interest, which is very late, so apologies for that.
That's okay, understood. Okay, in which case the report is to be noted that the forecast year-end budget position for the Dedicated Schools Grant as at 30th of September 2024, together with the associated explanations contained within this report, so noted. And that concludes today's meeting. Thank you for being here.